You're listening to Rise Up, stories of recovery, resilience, and renewal with Matthew Tobe.
Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Tobe. You're watching and listening to Rise Up, stories of recovery, resilience, and renewal. My guest today is an amazing person, Hilary Phelps. Hilary, thank you. Hilary is a speaker, addiction recovery advocate, a wellness coach. It's amazing. We have a lot of similarities there between the two of us. So I'm excited to hear your story. You've been talking a lot recently, really, about it. And that's how I came to find you again. And really, thank you for doing this. And let's hear your story. Let's start wherever you want to start. How's that?
I love that. Thank you so much for having me. And first, can I acknowledge how amazing I think you are by sitting in that cold tub every day?
That I love it. You're there. You're 30 seconds in the shower, you said. And I can't do that. A cold shower to me, I cannot do.
Well, it's after a hot shower. Let me be clear.
To me, it's like getting shot with like ice needles. I can't do it.
Really? So it's better to get full immersion in the tub.
I just go, everything I do. So I step into it, I stand next to it, I look at it. I know it's going to be, because we're up in Toronto, it's going to be 0 degrees. So it's at freezing, it's 32 degrees. I know what it's going to feel like when I get in. I go through the motions all the way through.
Okay.
So I get out, step in, drop down. It's cold. But once I'm in, and it started off doing like 45 seconds, I'm like, okay, push through 15 seconds, Now it's like 2 minutes. There are days when it's really cold. Last week it was minus 25, which is where Celsius and Fahrenheit converge. So minus 25 is minus 25 universally. And I sat in the water, which was still 0, but it was surrounded by ice. And I started looking. Usually I just don't move a lot because it's colder when you move.
Okay.
Yeah, but you build up a barrier around your body. So you actually heat up the water right around you. So when you move, it's always cold still. And I started noticing that crystals were forming around my arm because it was so cold. I'm like, I got to move. So yeah, so it's amazing. It's so good. Have you found changes with it yet?
Yeah. I mean, all the changes I've read about, it helps you to sit in discomfort a little bit longer.
Yeah.
It helps you not try to escape, which I think, as an addict and someone in recovery and just in general life, it's better to feel the feelings and let them move through you. Because when I was drinking, I just wanted to ignore them and have them go away. But when we can feel the feelings and process them and go through them, they don't get stuck in our body, in all different spaces, and they come out in other ways. So I don't know. Yes.
Yeah, that's the biggest one that I'm actually trying. When I started doing this was before recovery, and I've been in recovery for 17 years, and I just started doing this. I'm like, we need to get this introduced a lot quicker in the recovery community once they're healthy enough to start doing this and push through it. So we can talk about that a bit as well. So thank you for that, because it's awesome. And I can't wait to see you in one. So we're going to get you there.
One day. Yes, I will. And I know the benefits. And I've done the cold tub before with the ice when I was training for some different longer races. But so thanks for having me. I just wanted to acknowledge that of how inspiring you are when I
thank you.
And see you in that tub of chipping away the ice.
Yeah.
I mean, my story, it's funny because I share my story and I say it's a very middle of the road, I think, addiction story. As far as, when I was growing up, I grew up in my family was great. I love my parents. I have a sister and brother, and I got straight A's. I was a really good athlete. I was an overachiever. I was a swimmer. I was the fastest swimmer in the country in my age. When I was 11, I made nationals. I was on track for the Olympics, all of the things. But there was still this voice inside that's you're not good enough. You're not pretty enough or smart enough or funny enough. And I was always chasing this level of perfection that was undefined. It just wasn't enough. So even if and when I got sober, my first sponsor was like, what is your definition of perfection? And I was like, listed it. And she was like, what happens when you meet that? And I'm like, but I wouldn't be good enough. There was, what I mean? So the idea of perfection is just this amorphous idea. And so when I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, and I started, I was a swimmer, which wasn't a really cool sport, but I hung out with the lacrosse players and soccer players, and they would drink, and I wanted to fit in. I wanted to feel a part of. And so for me, drinking allowed me to feel like I was a part of it. And I don't know if it's because I quieted the voices in my head that said you're not good enough or you don't belong, or if I just didn't care, like who knows which one it was, but I started drinking at 14 and didn't like the taste of beer. And so a girlfriend and I would stand outside of a liquor store and we'd play the Hey Mister game because it was in the university college town. And we'd be like, hey, Mister, we've got $20. Can you buy us some Boone's Farm, which tasted sweet. I don't know if and we'd split a bottle and just check out, like run around and just, whatever.
Yeah.
It wasn't, and then drugs started to come in. Drugs were part of my story, experimented with those but alcohol was really what I loved. And that, into high school, I never really had any big consequences, meaning I didn't get arrested. I never got a DUI. I made bad choices, but just kind of chalked that up to being a teenager and being in high school and lessons learned.
Yeah.
But then I went on to college. I had a scholarship to swim, a full scholarship to swim in college. And I went to a great school. It was a really small liberal arts school in Richmond, Virginia. And it's a great place to breed addicts, like college. I mean,
yeah,
you can hide it,
very easily.
And so that's what I did. And so you can always find someone to drink with you. And that's really when my drinking progressed and took off. I became a blackout drinker. But I thought that was just part of the deal. That's part of going to college, like everybody drinks the way I do. But what I didn't understand, and my hangovers, would feel like equivalent to like a walking pneumonia. I could just not, it was so painful. Where everyone else is like, oh my gosh, I'm so hungover. It didn't really, I don't think it really was the same.
No, it was not the same.
But I managed to, I don't know how I say this, like by the grace of God, I graduated in 4 years. I didn't do great, like I do think that alcohol, didn't get great grades. My athletic performance slipped significantly. I started, I don't think I've shared this publicly. I shared this recently. I started carving words into my arm as like an emotional release, it's like an escape. And I think also I started experiencing some depression and I was trying to self-medicate or escape in whatever that looked like without talking about it, because my family, and I love my parents and they did nothing. This is, but they grew up in families and in a time when you don't talk about things. You don't talk about things outside of the home. You don't talk about things, like if they're coming up and I remember, at one point my mom's like, just put on your sunglasses and it's fine, just kind of like, as long as you look good on the outside. And so that's what she was taught. And that's what, my dad was taught. And that's what they passed on. And so I learned that as long as I looked good on the outside and I was still like functioning. Delivery, huh?
Yeah. You keep talking. I'm going to mute this for a second.
As long as I look good on the outside, it didn't matter really what was happening on the inside. And so when I couldn't really define or figure out what was going on the inside or find a solution to it, drinking became the only solution I had. And so that looked like, drinking in college. I drank all the time. And the consequences looked like not remembering how I got home, not knowing who this was next to me, or like how would these, what happened the night before. I mean, all of those things started, and that, and it was college. So I just kind of, again, chalked it up to the college experience of, it's kind of funny, but my senior year, my college roommates came to me and they were like, you're kind of acting like a jerk. Like you're not being kind. This is not who you are. Because for me, like the second I poured alcohol in my body, you didn't know who you were going to get. So it could be the funny, really, jovial Hilary that was great to be with, or it could be someone that wanted to fight anybody that would look at you funny, or it could be the sad, sappy, like crying, I'm so grateful for you. You're the best friend I've ever had, or you just never could be.
You never knew.
You never knew. And so that was and so I started, I think, more of the angry Hilary making really bad decisions started coming out, and they're like, this isn't you. And we don't think this is who you want. We don't think this is who you are. And I was like, what are you going to do about it? Like kind of had that cavalier attitude of like, this is me, deal with it or like move on, So from that moment, I chose alcohol above everything else. My friends, that were coming and saying they were concerned with how I was acting. And, that continued through, my professional life. I would drink 2 bottles of wine a day. I would, and then drink when I went out. I would do, I used to ride this commuter train. I lived outside of Washington, D.C. and would commute to work, and I would drink coffee in the morning. So I'd be hungover, and I'd get to work, and there was like a little liquor store in the train station, and they would sell little tiny bottles of wine, and everybody else would drink them in Dixie cups, like the little dentist cups, and I was like, I don't have time for that. Like, because I want to drink it. I don't want to sip it socially and have a conversation. And so I would rinse out my coffee mug and then get a couple of the bottles and fill my coffee cup up and then drink that and then go home and drink wine at home. And then if I went out so it just became, those were my habits and rituals that I created while I was drinking. And so, it just kept going, but it escalated, and I started to feel it in my body, like my kidneys would hurt. I'd wake up in the morning and I'd sit in the shower and I would like sit on the floor with the water beating on my back. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. This hurt. Like it hurts.
Mm-hmm.
My body hurts, my skin hurts. But by noon, the alcohol was moving its way out. And I was like, maybe I was wrong. I'm not
it's such a false sense of security. And even that, that drinking from the Dixie cup and appreciating it. I remember being at a party for a friend of mine, and there was a nice catered event and all this at their condo, and a server came by, and I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and they were all just sipping it. I'm like, I grabbed it and they looked at me and they said, did you swallow? Like, what did you do? It's gone. I'm like, yeah, I got no time for this.
Yeah.
Like, it was like, I'm literally not like, I don't even know what it tastes like. It was just get it going. It was amazing to know. And I remember when it got to the point of being the next day where that feeling, I actually reached a point where I didn't let it leave my body, where I was like the next morning, I'm like, I need a drink. Right. And I remember feeling better once it was awful like that. And I remember once this sticks out of my brain. I was in the backyard. Wife was inside, and there I was, literally drinking it from the bottle. Like the visual is awful, and thinking to myself, "Oh, this is like the elixir of life." Like it was like to even say that out loud is like that's how I felt, and to explain that to other people, like, what do you mean? I'm like I felt like death was there. That was it, and I needed to change it. So in order to change it, and it just made everything go away.
It's the only thing that would make it go away.
Yeah. It was.
I mean, and that's the thing. And I remember hearing in a meeting, I went to 12-step, and someone said, oh, I got my doctor to write me a prescription. And I don't remember what it was. So I would feel better the next morning, like almost immediately. I don't know if it was I don't know what it was. And this is when I knew I was an addict, but like, I was like, darn it. I wish I would have known about this a year ago. I'd still be drinking. Like, that's how I thought.
Yeah.
Like I'm grateful that I'm sober and not drinking. It was like, you mean there's a way that you would feel better and be able to continue drinking? I'm like, why didn't I know about this?
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's the stuff that have come out since then, and knowing how, again, like it progresses so slowly. Like it's, one of your quotes, that I read was, no child decides to want to wait to be able to be an alcoholic. And I actually posted that about a year and a half ago, a picture of me as like a 5-year-old going like, this kid did not see alcoholism in his future. Yeah. And it's nobody turns around and says, this is what I want to do. And somebody asked me once, like, well, how did it happen? I'm like, it happened. I couldn't even tell you. And that's, when I work in my, as a fitness professional, I look at people who are morbidly obese. People say to me like, how did they get there? I go, it just happens. Nobody turns around and says, I know, I want to start on my 600-pound life. Like, this is not a goal that people have. So I said, again, masking things, traumas, it became that for me, like it was self-medicating. And I also, I don't know if you feel this way. I feel like you said, like you're a mediocre, like a mid-grade. There's no big DUIs. I often feel, this is like my FOMO, I guess, that I just didn't hit it properly. Like I didn't have anything. Like I'll go to and I didn't do meetings for a long time. I found it, and there's different programs, different people. I found a different program for me. Yep. And it's funny. I even feel that I missed out by not doing 12 steps. Like it's so funny how I have conversations with people, and I'll work with people in recovery as clients for fitness, and they'll say, yeah, I'm on step 7. And I'm like, step 7? I got to Google it.
Yeah.
Right. So and I've since bought the big book and I'm learning how to, I'm going through it all, but it's amazing when you think like there are people, and I wouldn't even call it maybe at times imposter syndrome, because there are people who have gone through so much more. But then I think about it. I was a blackout drunk every day. Like I drank every day, all day. And then you think about it going like, was I really a mid-level addict? Because there are literally periods of my life where I can tell you, I have no idea. And to me, I look at that going, are we really that mid-grade, that mid-level? And even when I went to rehab, I sat there, and in my group, it was a men's group. And I don't do it like you. We don't do anything easy. Nothing's easy for an addict. Like I didn't take the easy way out. I went to a live-in program where I got permission to live out. I had a gym. I would wake up at 4:00 in the morning, train my clients from 4:30 to 8:30, go to rehab, get back at 5, go train my clients, and go home. Because I had a wife and a kid, and selfishly, I wanted to make sure they were there every night when I got home. That was a selfish move. But then I'd repeat it every day in, day out, work, rehab, work. And again, we don't do anything easy. And I remember sitting there in the group the very first day, and they all went through, and there were only 2 alcoholics in the group. Everybody else was like a heroin addict or a crack addict. And I'm like, I turned around and I said, I really feel like I'm the loser of the group. Like I only drank. Like you guys have like awful stories. I just drank. But it was amazing to look at how I went through it, and took, again, like a long time to actually tell anybody. Right.
Yeah. And that's what I feel like. Yes, too. Like I've shared in meetings before, and someone came up to me and said, well, your story's not that bad. And I remember thinking, but it was bad enough for me to get help. Right. And then you hear stories about people. And that's the beautiful thing, is that like our stories are sacred and they're ours. Like it doesn't matter. I mean, I have a friend, my friend, Charlie Engel, he ran the Sahara Desert, and he was like living in his car that was bullet ridden. He was a crack. And I'm like, I'm like, how are you alive? And it's like, but the feelings are the same. Like the feelings he felt and the feelings I felt when I came in are the exact same, that we're not good enough, that this is our only option of escape or feeling better, or not, like whatever that tool is, it's an addiction. And the thing is, like, and you probably, I mean, the fitness industry see this, like people use anything to escape. You can use food, you can use work, you can use exercise, like just addiction, drugs and alcohol are just, and food, I would argue, but drugs and alcohol are the things that you do, things that you don't remember, that you regret, that are illegal. Like, just a different level of addiction, but all those feelings are the same. We all use, not all, a large number of people use external things to fix an internal struggle or challenge.
Right. And it's always going to be there if you have that. Because I look at it, even starting my cold plunging, my cold immersion, that dopamine rush that I got for the first 3 weeks, I'd say, and I've only been doing it to this level since December, middle of December. Okay. And there were days where I'm like, I want to go again.
Yeah.
Right. Because I love that in everything it gave me. That feeling of alive right afterwards, of pushing through, and I can do this. And it was like, hey, you're only going to do it once a day, ever. Like I'm going later on today somewhere to do it for an event at doing hot saunas and then cold plunging. Yeah. And I'm like, literally have gone out 3 times going, I can do a minute now. Like it's because, right. Like part of me is still that, like, we still have it. Like
so it's manage it. And that's what I tell people. Like, it's not like it goes away.
No.
If I find something that makes me feel good, I want to do it again. Like, and when I came into when I started sobriety, when I stopped drinking, like I remember this, it's a pendulum swing, right? Like I would come in and I'd be like, this is the greatest day ever. I feel amazing. And then it would swing so drastically the other way where I'm like, this is not good. I would do anything to get out of this feeling. And so slowly over the time, in 15 years, like my goal is to stay right in the middle here.
Yeah.
I'm okay not feeling really great. And I'm definitely okay with not feeling really bad. But the thing I know is that both of them are going to end at some point, and I'm going to come out of the really good or the really
Yeah,
bad.
exactly.
So like my, but you're right. Like I started doing this somatic exercises. It's like trauma release. I mean, they're
Hmm.
really small and I love them because I literally, my body feels so good after just these really small. And I love that you just said that because now I'm like, can I do it twice in one day?
Right.
Because I feel so good.
And we had that. That's what I try to explain to people when addiction rears its ugly head. It's what is it that you have to have more of? Like I know there's certain food like we all have with foods. And I love what you said. Addiction is addiction. Whatever makes you feel good, that endorphin rush, that dopamine drop. Food, alcohol, sex, drugs, gambling, Amazon purchasing.
Buying anything.
Right? Like,
ooh, I don't need that, but I love it. And then 2 days later, you're like, meh.
yeah, exactly. That you kind of faded from it. Like I will sit there and I'm a t-shirt fan. I love t-shirts, and I'll load up my online cart with t-shirts, and I will purposely leave it for 2 or 3 days now.
I was just listening to something where it talks about procrastination. Sometimes procrastination is not great, right? When we're putting
Yeah.
off, not doing a project for work or not calling someone back because we don't want to. But in some instances, it was NLP, neuro linguistic programming.
Yeah.
They talk about how procrastination in that instance is great. So someone, not this, you did not say this, and I'm not saying you are, but like someone who is in debt will go in and just buy and put themselves into greater debt.
Right.
Where if they can use the tools of procrastination, where they put everything in a cart or go in and see things they like, but then wait a week, it's like, oh, I don't really want that as much. And so using those tools, it's like the setting makes them.
Yeah, for sure. And I got a tattoo. I have one tattoo I got years ago. And it took me a long time. I always wanted a tattoo, and I procrastinated getting it till I knew what I wanted. And I read a book, The Taoism of Sports. It's an amazing book, and you'll appreciate this because you're the track. The front cover was ancient Chinese writing, and I loved it. And it was kind of like calligraphy style thing, and with a paintbrush, and it meant thinking body, dancing mind. And that was my world. So to explain it to somebody, it was you're at the starting block. Your thinking body knows you have to stand there and wait till the gun goes off. Your dancing mind gets you the false start. Go, you gotta go, you gotta go, you gotta go. And that's where you hear a noise and you gotta go. Right? You walk into a store, I have to have that, I have to have that, but your thinking body goes, you don't. So, and it was funny, I got this a few years before I got sober. So I've always had that in me.
And isn't it, I think that teaches us, right? It's like the present moment is the most important. Like, right?
Yeah.
Dancing body, thinking mind, like whether it's purchasing something or checking out, by eating food or Amazon, like scrolling Instagram, I can be really good at that. It's like not wanting to be in the moment I'm in and wanting to escape whatever it is. Like boredom. Like, I have a 5-year-old. And so he's like, I'm bored. I'm like, use your imagination. Like, here's a piece of paper. What do you? And he's like, I want to play my iPad, or I want to play. And it's like, being bored is good sometimes.
Being bored is good.
Like the quiet moments of.
Well, it's also, we grew up at a time where we were bored and there was no real boredom. Like you found things to do, where now there's so many things thrown at us. And I remember during the pandemic, shortly afterwards, my oldest one started going through some depression and anxiety, and out of nowhere picked up his iPad. And I sat there, we're like, he's on that thing for hours. Found out he was drawing and done amazing, to the point where he would draw superheroes, to the point where he just went to university and we said, send us about a dozen. We're going to an art show and we're selling them. And so it's like, you're now a professional artist because you got paid for these. But we thought at first, oh, there he is on the iPad again and I would say 6-7 hours straight. And he'd come up, be like, look at this. I've redesigned all the logos for the NFL. I'm like, what? Like every one of them. So it's like, we look at it. So I look at now technology. When I see my kids on technology, I'm like, what are you doing? Are you am I seeing this? Just flipping their scroll up, or are they actually doing something on it? My middle one got really into YouTube, like all of the kids do. And my wife said, you got to go look at his browser history on YouTube. I'm like, I really don't want to look at a teenager's browser history ever in my life. But I did it, and it was amazing. I couldn't get mad. I opened it up, and the first thing on his YouTube channel was the Napoleonic Wars, episode 3. I'm like, which means he had to watch episode 2 and episode 1. So I went back on this, and it was just history and watching a deep dive of where you go if you back it up. Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, so now I'm not so upset with what he's doing. At least he's absorbing knowledge and not just, watching Ren and Stimpy,
yeah.
So let's go back here. So you've gone through this. When did you decide you needed to go to rehab?
So I had, so I found myself in kind of dysfunctional relationships because I wanted to fill the hole somehow. And I, drinking worked clearly, but I also loved it and hated it at the same time. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't like the best at it. I wasn't healthy, so I wasn't looking for healthy people.
Right.
And, so I'd been in this relationship ended but he got me sober. So I say, like, by the grace of God, mm-hmm. this relationship happened. But I moved out and I moved into an apartment, and it was the first time I was on my own because I'd always lived with somebody. And in that, I think it was 10 days. I swear to you, it was like 10 years because the amount of drinking and just debaucherous behavior in those 10 days was like, and internally, I was concerned that it was a problem because at one point I'd gone out drinking, came home, finished the bottle of wine that was in my house. And I was like, there's nothing left, but I couldn't go to sleep. Like, I don't know, for people that mm-hmm. It's that feeling of like nervous energy and your skin hurts and like, it feels like there are pricklies on the inside of your body. Yeah. Like you can't, that was my experience. I couldn't just lay down and be like, okay, I'm going to bed now. And so I walked across the street. There was a hotel bar, and I went across the street and I sat down and I was like, glass of wine. He's like, we close in 30 minutes. I'm like, cool. Can I have a glass of wine? Can I have another glass? And again, no, you're an addict. Cause I'm like, it's those little tiny wine glasses. Like,
yeah.
And,
look, I know that.
With the Dixie cups. And I had 6 in 30 minutes. And the guy was just like, are you? And I was like, yes. And I couldn't get drunk. It would not work. It stopped working. And I was like, well, this stinks. Like, what do I do? So I went home, I got really sick. And I was like, now what? Like, because all of a sudden it's like, your best friend, like the best relationship in your life has just failed you. And I was like, what do I do? And so, I kept going. I'd gone out, I got kicked out of bars. Like I had all this. Mm-hmm. And one night this relationship that had ended called, and he was like, you're pretty bad. Like, I don't know if I called him or texted him one night, like when I was really wasted. Right. And but he's like, this can't happen anymore. Like, you need to get help. And if you don't get help, I'm going to go to your family and I'm going to tell them exactly how bad you were. And that shame of like all the stuff I tried to hide, because there's still mm-hmm. that level of, you don't want anybody to know how bad it is. Like, right? Like, what is it? Our lives have become unmanageable and we were powerless. Like, we were powerless.
Yeah.
Our lives have become unmanageable. I knew my life was unmanageable. I knew I was making bad decisions. I knew I was just existing, like in my, I knew, but I didn't think I was powerless because I was like, I can stop at any time I want. I could not stop at any time I want.
I tried. I think it lasted about 13 seconds. Like,
I tried all the things. Like, so I went to 12-step and I wasn't ready, because it was like, I'd go 3 months and I wasn't willing to look at the things that caused me to drink in the first place, because there's always this, alcoholism, alcohol, drugs are just a symptom of what's happening inside of us. It's a symptom of the disease. It's a way that we try to manage the feelings. And I wasn't ready to look at the things like, a big hole inside of my heart, which now is filled with, spirituality, wellness, connectedness, community, all of the things that we find when we get sober that helped me feel really whole and supported. And I wasn't ready. And so I do this like 3-month dance of going in and out and in and out. And then I looked up and I was like, well, I guess I'll check out an outpatient rehab, which I didn't even know existed. Because inpatient is for people with real problems.
That was also part of why I wanted to. I get it.
I should have gone to inpatient, I would have qualified for an inpatient, but I was still like that, And if this doesn't work, then maybe I'll check out the inpatient. But, I don't want people to know I have a problem. I mean, I'm pretty sure people knew I had a drinking problem or an issue. It wasn't a healthy relationship with alcohol. But, and I called a place and they said, we can't take you in today. It was a Friday. Can you stay sober this weekend? I was like,
And that's why you also hear those horror stories of, someone's last night before they went into rehab is often regrettably their last night.
I told people at the bar I was going to rehab.
Right.
I remember, this is my last hurrah before I try to get sober. And I so cavalier. And I was sitting next to a Coke dealer at a bar. It was a nice bar. I mean, it was but I was like, maybe I won't go to rehab, but I'm going to marry this guy. This guy's going to solve my problems. And I joke, I'll become Sharon Stone in Casino and just live a beautiful life married to, and I didn't can't even tell you his name, but and that was it. And I went home that night. I drank all night. I was hanging out with the bartenders. We went to an after hour, and I was in bed for 2 days. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't eat. It was the worst hangover. And the thing that I found is any of the, well, this, any of the time in between, if I drink really heavy the night before, the next day, it's can't do it again. And I'm but I can't stop because this feels really bad. I couldn't even leave to get another bottle of whatever. And this is before DoorDash and Uber Eats and all the other things.
Yeah.
It was horrible. I mean, it's purgatory, right? I mean, it's purgatory because you can't eat, you can't move, you can't shower. And so that sounds so bad. And I slept for 2 days and I got up on that Monday and I went to rehab and checked in and I lied on my intake, but from that point forward, I still tried to make it look good. I still went into rehab because you do check in and then you do separation, male, one female. And then there's it's called feelings management. And what I realized was I'd walked through life with these clenched fists, waiting for something to happen. I was always on the defense, physically, emotionally, always. And I started to get well, but I still tried to look like I was fine. They were like, how are you? And meanwhile, I'm crying, huge crocodile tears. And I'm like, I'm really good today.
Yeah.
And they were like, are you?
You look back and you can laugh at it. And I look at when I did, I sat there, I didn't say a word for 3 days. I didn't talk to anybody. And we're in this group. And I remember, so I got sober December 21st. And I didn't go to rehab till Valentine's Day. So I was clean on my own for that whole time, which is so hard.
Amazing.
And I went in, it was such a hard, so I did go weekly to a program to get me into this inpatient. And I was every week, I'm begging, I need to great. I stopped. I needed to know why I was drinking. I've always said, like you said, the symptom behind it, it's, you remember the Simon Sinek book, Find Your Why, right? Mm-hmm. I'm you need to know your why. Know why you're doing it. I just need to know the why behind it. And didn't talk for 3 days. And they said, you have to be ready. And the fact they used to said before, your best relationship is ending. And I've said to many people since they've gotten sober, people have called me saying, what do I do? I got a son, a daughter, a spouse. I'm you need to understand that when they stop using, they are ending their relationship with their very best friend, their only friend they've ever had.
It's grief.
Yeah. I'm you need to understand that, no matter what, there's no judgment from that, what you're addicted to. There's nothing. So I went in there for 3 days, sat there, and the guy who got me into the program said, you need to be prepared. They're going to call you on your bullshit. And because what you say on Tuesday, you may say again on Thursday a little bit differently, and you're going to get called on that bullshit. Yeah. You're not at the bar anymore, buddy. And I sat there for 3 days, not saying a word, listening to everybody else. And one guy kept on kind of sabotaging somebody else's time to speak and story. And finally, I said, would you shut up? And everyone just sat there, they're oh shit, he speaks. And oh my God. Right. I had just been building up that whole time I was in there, and I just had to release. Then all of a sudden I walked out, just tears. I just had to get it out. So it's hard though, because I walked in there kind of stoic and lonely as hell. And people realize that it's really the loneliest thing because you don't have that best friend with you. That's what people don't understand about that challenge. And people say to me now, I don't know if you've ever got the same question. Well, do you think you can drink again? Can you ever drink again? And I get that question all the time. I'm like, yeah, I can drink right now. Like, it's not like the AA police are going to show up and take it. I'm like, anytime I want to drink, I can drink. It's my choice, just like it's your choice. And they're like, oh, I'm like, that's what we go through. Every day I can drink if I choose to.
I forgot, or I haven't tapped into that lonely feeling in a long time. But
Yeah.
I remember what you said was so lonely and terrified, because my fear was, what is life going to look like? I remember, because I wasn't married, I'd never been to France. I'd always romanticized the idea of like beautiful goblets and drinking next to a fireplace and like all of this stuff. I'm like, well, that doesn't happen without it. And that's what I want. And so that to me is happiness and joy and contentment and love and all this stuff. So what does life look like now? And that's what was so terrifying. But it was also like sitting in a room full of people or walking into a room, I felt more lonely with surrounded by a ton of people when I was drinking than I've ever have in my life.
Yeah.
And I've forgotten that, because like through being sober, through recovery, through a community, I feel connected and I feel right. And that's what they say, like, life gets better beyond your wildest dreams. And I roll my eyes when I heard that. I'm like,
Yeah, right.
Really? Does it? Like,
Yeah.
You don't understand. You don't know what
we knew everything. It's almost like you're like 5 years old. You know the world. Like I'm the dumbest man alive because I have 3 teenagers. They point out how stupid I am all the time because I'm like, yeah, I don't know how I got this far in life and made 3 people. They're still alive. No idea how that happened. Right.
My son told me he's 5. My son told me the other night, I put the bath bomb in the bathtub before he got in. And he's like, you're the worst mother. You're the worst mama I could ever have been given or could ever imagine. Something like not even the worst mama ever, but like that I could have ever been. And I was like, and at first I'm like, oh my gosh. And then I'm like, okay, it's not personal. He's just upset. He doesn't know how to, but I was like, and I said to him, I'm like, I need to expose you to a lot more moms then, man. Like,
you think I'm bad?
You get a bath bomb every night. Like you get food, like you get.
Let's take this through here. You get a bath bomb every night. Like
not just a bath. Like
yeah, not just a bath. You get like cold, warm running water. Yeah, I hear you. So you went through that. Going in through those doors is hard. And that's what, again, you're lonely. It's scary. It's terrifying. I found it to be the quietest room I've ever, like the quietest building I've ever been in. It was like eerily quiet. No, either nobody was talking or I just had some blinders on the ears and it was more like a deafening vacuum when I walked in. And well, I don't know about yours. What we did is it was a 3-week program and your very first day, you're scared out of your mind. You're terrified. You were the guests watching the graduation. So they actually had a transition where the people who were, you went in when people were leaving. So they had like their graduation speech.
Oh, wow.
So at the end of 3 weeks, you went up and you made a speech and you spoke about your experience to people who are on day 1. And I remember sitting there thinking, oh my God, I've got 21 days. Like, oh my, like, and look at these people, who the hell are they? And I'm like, and then 3 weeks later, it was amazing to be like, I get goosebumps thinking about it because it was like 3 weeks later, I learned a lot about myself and got to, again, impart. And I remember saying in my speech, I'm looking at all of you and you're looking at me and you're thinking, who the hell is this guy? Why is he talking to me? And you're probably not even listening to me. But in 3 weeks, you're going to remember this crazy guy standing here and you're going to think, oh my God, I can't believe I did it. Right. And it's amazing. And then you hear horror stories. I don't know if you had this when and just on a side note, we had our last few days, we were in a nice part of Toronto, nice little urban area. And our therapist said, so just, there's no evening passes at all during the last week because about 3 groups before us, they had an evening pass the night before graduation and they all went to celebrate. And they all went drinking.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that's what we know. So anyway, so going back to this, so you're in the rehab, you came out obviously a different person, because you come out different.
And so what I realized was, I remember when I did that, when I was sitting there with tears and I was crying and they were like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "Nothing, I'm great." And then I don't know what, but all of a sudden I was like, actually, I'm not great. I'm sad. I'm lonely. I'm scared. Like all of these things are just coming up and I don't know how to deal with this. Like, I'm confused and I'm like all, and I just like, and they clapped. I was like, I'm a failure. I can't control this. I don't know what's happening to me. And you're sitting here clapping for me. And they're like, welcome, welcome to recovery. This is
Right.
welcome. Like, what do you mean? And that's kind of when I learned, and when I started, like, you're only as sick as your secrets, and the things that I kept quiet inside of me that felt shameful. I mean, and look, the thing is, like, we all make mistakes. Shame is shame. Guilt is guilt. Grief is grief. Love is love. Like, they all feel the same.
Mm-hmm.
There are no levels to them. They're all feelings that we feel. And I just remember thinking, like, I'm the worst person on the planet because I couldn't stop drinking. And like what I learned was that's not true. And the more like I opened up about, I used to hide my drinking from, and they were like, yeah, so did I. So did I.
Yeah.
So did I. And I was like, you did? You hid drinking too? And they're like, yeah, we're addicts. That's what we do. And I was like, really? But because I didn't talk about it to other people, because I wasn't sharing openly, because, I mean, clearly, like, because it was this big guarded secret, like, I didn't understand that other people felt the way I did. And when I started understanding that other people felt the way I did and did the things I did, I felt less alone and I felt more apart when I never had that. I never felt a part of anything, even though I was on the even though I was on an athletic team, even though I was part of a great family, even though I had great friends, like all this stuff, I still felt alone and disconnected. But what rehab gave me and what like recovery has given me is the ability to feel connection with somebody else.
Right. Which is huge. So when you left rehab, you're out, you're clean, it's great. Life takes on a whole new meaning. Where did it head? Well, because you kept it quiet still. You didn't tell anybody really.
I still kept it right now. I mean, my family knew, and then, my college roommates knew, but nobody else did. And I kept, because the first year, 2 years, 3 years, I stuck really tight and closely with the 12-step community.
Right.
I found people, I found new friends. It's weird because I'm like, what do I do at Christmas? Like, what do I do on New Year's Eve? What do you mean? And that my first New Year's Eve, there were 2 other people that were sober. And we rolled sushi. Like, it was horrible. I mean, it was like, we didn't get the rice to keep, but it was fun. Right. And it was like, okay, well, I got through that. Now what? And so what I realized is like getting through things one day at a time, like whether it's a birthday, a Thanksgiving, a birthday party, like whatever it is. Once I got through it once, I knew I could do it again. And the hardest thing for me was saying no. People are like, come to a happy hour. No. And I remember but I would take those things into rehab because it was outpatient. So we would go in and out. Or I take those things to other people who weren't drinking or who were sober. I'm like, what do I do? They're like, just say no. And I'm like, but what are they going to think of me? How do I say? And that was hard. It's like, and you said this earlier, people aren't thinking of me. They're thinking of themselves. Like 9 times out of 10 people are, and if they are thinking about me, what I realized was it was because I was the token really drunk person in the group that they didn't have to look at themselves to say, maybe drinking's out of control. Now all of a sudden she's not drinking and she's not here. Oh no, I've stepped up to like the biggest drinker in the group. So what does that say about me? And so of course they want, but that took a lot of time. And I mean, I didn't talk about it really at all. And then I would just say things like, I'm not drinking, or no, thank you, in a new situation. You learn tools, like I've learned tools like having club soda or sparkling water with lime, always having a full one in my hand, never having somebody else get one for me.
Have you also noticed, do you ask for it in the same glass you would get a mixed drink in?
Oh yeah. Well, that's usually what they give it to me.
Okay. Because I'll go to events where if you ask for like club soda and lime, they put it in. So they get like a big solo cup, like a red cup, but a big one. I'm like, can you put it in that glass? Can you put a low ball, please? Like I have to walk around looking like it. So nobody, and it was more just to avoid the conversation.
Yeah. And isn't that interesting? Like not drinking alcohol is the only thing that people question you on. Like
Right.
if you say you're diabetic, nobody's going to be like, why aren't you, you can have one bite of dessert. It's not going to kill you. Can't you just have one? And it's like,
Right.
why is it that when I choose, or I've worked this hard to remove alcohol from my life,
Right.
that it becomes a conversation? Like,
Yeah. And it's funny. And like you said, like you get your own drink. I was at an event where I was with a friend of mine. We ordered the drink. He ordered one, I ordered another one. And he passed me. But I wasn't the first one. For the first time, I didn't watch the bartender. He passed me the drink and I went like this. And I've got a habit. I always smell a drink now, no matter what. So I'm like, I looked at my friend and said, try this. And he goes, oh, dude, that's gin and tonic, man. And he goes, take mine. I'm like, you try yours first. And he goes, he made 2 gin and tonics. And so people don't realize, and listen, if I had taken a sip of it, would I have seen that as the end of the world? Only if I'd gone, right? Like, oh my God. But it was like, my friends, are you okay? I said, I'm fine. I didn't drink it. But if I had taken a sip, it wouldn't be the end of the world unless it continued. Right. I know different people say like, well, that's starting from day one again, but it's not. I've heard, I started for a time that like
intention, that
right.
was not intention. You didn't go and ask for it. And right. So,
so
I'm with, yeah.
But it's amazing. So now, and now everybody, because I'm so open about it, once I told everybody what it was, I wrote the article for the Post, and it was like, now everybody knows what it is. And, I'll go to parties and people say like, well, do you want me to buy some mocktails or like 0% alcohol? I'm like, you know what? Really? Do you have some like ginger ale, some bubbly? Like, I'm good. I do not need. And I know New Year's Eve, we went, because my wife will have a glass of wine here and there. We went to a friend's for New Year's Eve and went to the liquor store. And she says, do you want to get like a non-alcoholic beer? And I'm like, I've never had one. So I went over to, I don't know if they sell them here. We're at the liquor store. I went and I looked there was the aisle there, and there were like 5 different types there. And my 13-year-old walked over and he went, Dad, do you need it? And I was like, you know what? Let me ask you, why are you asking me that? He says, well, what if you really like it? And you decide that beer's okay. I'm like, you know what? Let's go. And we left. And I think that in my own head, that's what I always thought. But I think it's been long enough. And he was like, hey, he was like a little Jiminy Cricket going, hey, just in case, do you need it? The concern on him, though, when he walked up to me, it was amazing. And I'm like, that's why I've never had it. So,
and I'm with you. I have a juicer and I make ice cubes. So like pomegranate,
right,
pineapple, jalapeno ice cubes and then I'll pour sparkling water over it like here. And I've gone to a 0 proof party where they're all, and I had one there, but to your point, and I did buy a 0 proof rosé for a friend who was like doing dry January, like who normally drinks, but yes, to your point, I don't order them. And I remember being in a restaurant with a friend in New York and she's like, get a mocktail. She'll have a mocktail. And I'm like, no, the 0 proof things on and I was like, no, I won't. Because if you make mistakes happen and you might think it's not a big deal, but I don't know what that's going to do to me. And I don't want to find out.
Yeah.
And this thing, because I used to drink when I was trying to quit, I would drink non-alcoholic beer and I drank 6 in 30 minutes trying to get a little buzz. And so I'm like, it's no is no, yes is yes.
Yeah. And and for some people, I find whatever they need, if that's going to get them up, do it. Yeah. I was a hard stop person, so I had to hard stop it. So you kept it quiet for so long inside of your roommates, your family. What about when you came out, when you came out, be like,
it's so funny because someone's like, you just came out. I'm like, is this what it feels like? Like, oh my gosh, because for so long.
You felt taller.
I did. I was like, and for so long, I felt like I'd had these 2 feet, one in my life and then one in kind of the hidden, because people I just didn't tell. Like you were saying, you're healthy. And I was just like, oh, I just don't drink. I'm healthy. It's just a choice I've made. And COVID was really hard because I'm a very big, I do go to 12-step meetings. I would be around people. I love community. I love my people. I love being able just to be open and just talk freely and openly about honestly, and then I would be around other people socially and I'd be like, wait, I can't say that. Oh, wait, I can't say I don't drink. Oh, wait. And I'd be so guarded, and it was so much energy focusing on like what I can and can't say. And so, you know, in COVID, I spent a ton of time in meditation because meetings were closed down. I couldn't get out. Like I couldn't go see people. And so I really dove into a really strong meditation practice. And I'm talking hours sometimes. Like I have a 5-year-old, I put him down for a nap, I'd meditate while he napped. I put him down for bed, I'd meditate before bed, because it was the only place I could go to find peace and solace in the time when everything felt so chaotic, which reminded me of like early sobriety, where like, I don't know what's happening. So that, and then that really carried, and I've continued that since, you know, for the past couple of years. And that's something that's like a non-negotiable for me, because I always thought that praying was asking for help and meditation was receiving it. Right. So whatever it was that I heard was, and so, and during that minute, I was like, it's been 15 years. That's a long time. That's how long I spent drinking. And so a friend had a podcast, went to college together. He had 10 years sober, and I reached out to him because he was really open about it. And I'm like, hey, that's amazing. I'm not open, but congratulations. I'm glad you are. If you ever need anything, you're in DC, let me know, go to a meeting with you. Like, that's cool. So right? The universe delivers. He reached out in April, 2 months before my 15 years. And he was like, hey, I'd love to have you on my podcast. Would you ever consider sharing your story? And I said to him, had you asked me a month earlier, I would have said no.
Right.
But it was the right time. And I said yes. And I shared it on social. It just felt right. I was in because for a long time, I still felt shame around it. And I still had that character defect of worrying about what other people would think of me and whether they'd like me, because I always wanted to be liked. But what I realized was it wasn't that I was trying to make friends based on who I was trying to be friends based on what I thought they wanted me to be. And in the time when I shared at 15 years, I was like, you know what? I'm 44. I'm 44. I have 15 years of sobriety. I am done trying to make other people like me for who I think they want me to be. And I'm going to be me. And if this means that 10 people don't want to be my friend, or they don't want to hang out with me anymore, or they don't want to have a play date with my child because I'm at 15 years not drinking, I'm okay with that.
Right.
And I shared. And so I shared openly. And what I found in return, so for me, I shared because it was part of my healing journey. Right. It was me. It was like, just to be free. And I felt free. In that moment of sharing, I felt totally free. But what I heard back was moms that were struggling, you know, women whose parents were addicts, and they were like, your son is so lucky, because I wasn't that lucky. And I was like, oh my gosh. My brother died of suicide because he was an addict. We need people talking about this. Thank you for speaking up. Thank you for sharing your message. Thank you for using your platform in this way. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is needed. Why aren't more people? And the more I started diving into the research, and the more people I started talking to, like I work with a treatment center, Ashley Addiction Treatment in Maryland. And I started talking to CEOs about some of the research, and they were like, yeah, 2 to 2.5 men get sober to every 1 woman. Not successful, but just seeking help. I'm like, why? And then you see the numbers from COVID, the increase in women, 41% in heavy drinking among women, because the mommy wine culture, because it's, you know, and like maybe 5 of those women that are drinking can go home and not have a drink later, but maybe there's that one that can't stop drinking, and now all of a sudden she's concerned. She can't say anything to her 5 friends so what does she do? Nobody's talking about recovery. No, you know, and I found that there weren't a lot of women recovering out loud. And a friend of mine says so beautifully, and she's like, there are people who recover in public so those in private can keep healing, that they can keep going because they're not ready to share their story. And you don't have to. Nobody has to share their story. No. You know what? It's sacred, it's personal, it's private. But if I can help people feel less alone and less shameful in the struggles they have, then that's it. You know?
And some people are meant to do it. Like I know when I took my time to do it, say like, we're meant to do it. And there are others who are not. And I know that when I tell my story, and to this day, like people, I got stopped outside of the grocery store one day by a woman who I had met years earlier at a play date. And we've been friends on Facebook. She's following my posts, and she's like, you know, do you have a minute? I'm like, and I didn't have a minute, but sure, I got a minute. And she said, I think I have a problem. I started drinking at about 7 glass of wine, and now it's 4. like 4 o'clock.
Right.
And I'm just going longer and longer. And I said, well, listen, I can be cliche and say, well, if you think you have a problem, you have a problem. But I'm going to be honest with you. If you think you have a problem, you have a problem. No matter what that problem is, I said, there's a lot more there. We spoke more about it. I think an hour later, I left the grocery store. But it's when we tell the story and we don't know who we're affecting, the people that we don't know who are watching that story. When I got sober, when I was found on the kitchen floor with my wife staring down at me. The look of like, the look that I looked up at, and I had full fear, but my fear was the fact that I remember coming home asking the nanny to leave, or telling the nanny to leave, she can go home, and giving my son, my year and a bit old, a bath. And I woke up on the bathroom floor looking at my wife thinking, I remembered the bath. I don't remember putting him to bed. That fear, like to this day, when somebody says, will you ever have a drink again? No, I'm good. I got that. That's my heart.
I feel that.
Yeah.
I feel that, like that.
Heart stopping. Luckily, I ran to the bathroom. The bath was empty. The water there. I did put him to bed. But 4 days later, we were on vacation as a happy family. And we met a family there, and the family we met there, he looked at me, he said, do you want a drink? I'm like, no, I'm good. I don't drink. And so I actually said that publicly. Between that last night of drinking at the bar and that day, I hadn't really spoken to anybody. And he said to me, you don't drink? I'm like, no, I just stopped drinking a few days ago. I definitely have a problem. He goes, oh. He goes, do you mind if I drink? I'm like, as long as you mind that I don't. So I had that defense right away. I'm like, you mind that I don't? We're good. He messaged me, and this is going back 17 years. Yeah. I got a message over Christmas, 17 years to the time when I met him, saying, just so you know, I've been following your story, and I haven't had a drink in 6 months because I've been following you ever since we met, and we don't really talk, but I realized I had a problem. Because of your posts year after year and talk these last 5-6 years, I've decided to stop drinking to get sober. I'm like, and I didn't even know how to respond. Like, I find that too sometimes I don't know how to answer somebody. I'm like, I don't know what to say. But it's amazing because we tell that story. We get, long story short, we don't know who we're affecting quietly.
And I think it's wonderful that we can share like wins too, right? Because people are like, oh, because when I got sober, I thought my life was over. I'm like, I'm never going to laugh again. I'm never going to have fun again. Like, what does dating look like? Like, what does all this stuff look like? Like, I was terrified. And the cliche, right? It's more beautiful than I could have imagined.
Right. And the amount of people that I've spoken to on the podcast and in general out there who are in the community, I always find our lives were we had some crazy shit going on back then. Like, they're always interesting, like, and then once we get sober, I really thought things would calm down. They're more chaotic and more crazy, unbelievable things have happened to myself and everybody I've spoken to, whether it's a small thing or massive, that just like unbelievable, that wouldn't have happened. Because I can honestly say, if I continued the journey I was on, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation right now. I would not be alive.
Not a chance.
Right. And that brings it back to, how is our story any different than anybody else's who had more? Does the 7 DUIs and waking up in jail and facing,
Well, they say the not yets, right? Like, someone asked me, like, have you ever had a spiritual experience? And I was like, the fact that I'm not dead, because I was a blackout, I drove. I ended up the wrong metro in a not great part of DC. I didn't know I was there, and then woke up in my bed to a text the next day from someone like, I saw you at Branch Avenue. I was worried that you weren't going to get home okay. Did you? Right. And I'm like, oh, remember that? Like, right. That's terrifying. Like, I would for sure be dead. For sure, like the not yets. I would for sure have multiple DUIs. I for sure would not have a beautiful child that I have now. I for sure would not be happy, joyous, and free. But also to be clear, like life's not perfect. It's
No.
not rainbows and butterflies all the time. And like, I don't want people to get that and I've shared this. Last year, my dad died. Like my year last year was one of the most challenging I've had in my life. Finalized a divorce. I moved. I launched a business. And then my dad died unexpectedly. Didn't wake up one morning. And my dad was my world, my anchor. Like, and I wanted to drink so bad.
Right.
Because I did not want to feel the feelings of me not having my dad around, like not having a hug from him. Right. And like, because when my dad died, the only thing that would have fixed it is a hug from him. Mm-hmm. Or, the drink wasn't going to fix it. And like, but the fact that I had 15 years behind me and I had built up enough muscle memory to do other things instead of like when I wasn't feeling great, I picked up the phone and not always, but, or I would eat ice cream because at the end of the day, eating ice cream is so much better than drinking a bottle of wine, like for me. And so I built up those actions, and I shared this, like there was a time this summer when I just like had so much emotional energy and I was like, F it. I want to punch something or drink. Like, and that's not me. Again, like
we still have it. We still have moments.
It's like, but it's being able to manage it in a way that's more healthy.
Yeah. Well, it's funny when you said the ice cream. After I got sober, we were at a friend of ours who had been sober for years. We were out for dinner at their dinner at their place, and I wasn't really an ice cream girl. Like, I like ice cream, but I wasn't really. And he's like, "Hey, you want it?" And he had ice cream every night. And he was a fitness professional as well. Every night, because that was his thing. That was the sugar in there that he needed, and that kept him going, not drinking. Okay, we had a bowl of ice cream. He goes, "Hey, you want another bowl?" I'm like, "Yeah." I went out. I left. I went to the washroom or something. And while I was gone, he looked at my wife and said, "How long has he been sober for?"
Because
and she's like, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "I knew you guys. We used to work together. He was a coffee drinker. He drank, not like badly, but he drank. I always was worried about him. Never saw him have ice cream. He went for a second bowl. He's like, how long has he not had a drink for?" And she's like, "Holy shit!" Like, so the ice cream I find, and I tell people when they, I have a friend who called me up and said, my cousin's going through rehab a bunch of times. It's not sticking. What do I do? I'm like, you need to be there. It may take a bunch of times. I said, but here's one thing which comes out, because she was there at that moment. I said, you need to go to the store and get a whole lot of sugar candy. He's like, what? I'm like, it's not just the alcohol withdrawal you're going through. There's sugar in there. That's what and that was when I went away to Jamaica after I stopped drinking that one night. My best friend, who was a rehab specialist, because we work in circles, so my best friend was an addict, and he said to my wife, "Get tons of candy, bring it with you." And so I know we used to have a business next to a candy and nut store, and they knew if I was having a bad day, I'd walk in, almonds and cashews. Today is awesome. I'd walk in 3 days later. I'd walk out with $30 worth of like candy. They're like, bad day, bad day.
What's your candy of choice?
My candy of choice it's seasonal. Like right now, I can really go, and we actually bought some and they're gone. Those little cinnamon heart candies for Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
So anything like hot like that, like hot tamale candies, like all of them. What's that?
The fireballs.
The fireballs, all those. And it's funny because my friend said, he goes, "You like those stupid cinnamon candies? Were you a Jägermeister drinker?" I'm like, "No." Right? And there's a really funny meme I saw where the people are looking at a candle and they said, and this is the world that I was in. And the girl says, "Oh my goodness, Becky, this smells like Jägermeister." She goes, "We call that cinnamon." The rest of us call that cinnamon. So now, do you find I make a lot of jokes about I'm a very dark sense of humor person, and with your dad passing, I remember my mom passing. I went dark because of who I am. I went dark humor. Although it was funny, right after the funeral, I went to the Shiva house at my dad's, and my uncle came out. My mom's brother, my uncle came up to me, and I get it. His sister died, so he was wasted. I get it. He comes up, puts his arm around me and says, "So are you going to be okay? Because we're all worried about you and I'm in charge of watching you." I'm like, "You're doing a really good job."
Like they put you in charge?
I'm like, I said, I need to watch you. You realize that because you're cut off. But it was like, you see that. So I joke around with my kids. I remember for my 60th sobriety, I had this mug made. And I had T-shirts made, and the kids, we actually did a little TikTok reel and for it. And I remember my 14-year-old at the time looked at me and said, I know what we should do for your anniversary for sobriety. I'm like, what? He said, we should go bar hopping. So we have a really bizarre humor around it all. Yeah. Do you find that you make jokes here and there if you can, or do you kind of...
I find that to people in recovery, I can.
Right.
Yes. Like, I feel like if I take it outside, like I had someone say to me a joke about rehab that's not sober, that doesn't have a problem. And I felt offended by that because I'm like, I don't know if you're trying to relate to me or if you're making fun of me. And I don't think they were making fun of me, but like I get very sensitive because I don't think that anybody understands it unless you're an addict, like the depths.
Have you ever seen the sitcom Mom?
No.
It's with, I forget her name. She was in The West Wing, the tall one, Allison something or other. I forget her name.
Oh, Allison Janney and the blonde. I know who you're talking about. Okay. Yeah, I have not seen it. So, should I watch that?
Based on what you just said, maybe. I don't know. My wife would watch it and she would laugh, and I would sit there. She's like, "You don't find that funny?" I'm like, "No."
Because I remember someone said once, like this was like, again, early in sobriety, and they're like, what did they say in AA? Like, one day at a time. And I remember being like, go to hell, and they're like, right. Not even, it's not direct. It is not personal. What's the 4 agreements? The book, The 4 Agreements, yeah. Like, take it personally. Like, it is not personal. It is not all about me. But in that moment, I was like,
even watching Seinfeld, when I hear that one episode, Serenity Now, and I'm like, it was funny at the time. It's still funny, but now I know the prayer. And it's not so funny. Yeah, there's some things. So that TV show, it is very, very funny. But it's also, there are times where it's like, if you and I were talking about it, we can laugh. I could laugh at it. But with a third person who really doesn't understand that they woke up somewhere else and they should have been, forget somebody else's bed, like could be just somewhere else. I'm like, that seems funny the way they do it, and the laugh track adds to it, but really, it's not so funny.
Or someone's like, oh, I had a blackout once. It was terrifying. I remember being like, yes. Yeah. And imagine not being able to, imagine doing that over and over and over again for years. Like it's, but I have a friend that's in recovery, and we were joking. I'm like, thank God I did not know you then. Like, thank God we were not drinking together. And he's like, would we have been married? I was like, probably married and dead. Like there is not a chance. Like we would be here had we met then. Right.
Well, I joke around with a friend of mine saying, thank God the mixed drinks and all the stuff they have now pre-made did not exist. I go, number one, I probably would have diabetes too. But on top of that, like, and we would joke around. He goes, well, if I do relapse, and I go, I'm allowed to drink the things that weren't invented back then. It doesn't count. Like we would joke like that. Like it doesn't count because it wasn't around back then.
This was something you just talked about, relapse, right? This is how also I know, like, how I know I'm an addict, right? Like when people like would talk about relapsing, they're like, I did this, I did that. And I was like, if I ever relapsed, it would be like it would be cases of wine, probably some drugs, a cabin in the woods, no electricity. No, I don't need any. I would sit there. I would do it alone. Yeah. I don't want to go out and drink like a lady in a bar and have a couple of glasses of wines with friends. And I was like, oh yeah, that probably means I should. Yeah, exactly.
I'm going somewhere off the grid and no one knows, and I'm just going, and not so that nobody finds out. I got to do this. I want, like, it's that.
I don't want distractions.
Yeah. I got to focus. I got a job to do. Yeah. I was good at it before, so I got to be great at it now. So yeah, it's an amazing thing that we've come through. And I think of a lot of your time. I want to thank you for spending it with me and talking about it. So
I feel like I could talk to you forever. I'm like, oh,
this is easy. I love this. Like honestly, if I was in Baltimore, we'd go for drinks. No. like,
Yes.
and I think that's one of the things about the sober community in general that is so big. And I think that's also why you're seeing more of it and the sober curious. I do find things like dry January. I actually noticed that the Cancer Society, I don't know if it's in the States, but I know here in Canada, they're doing a dry February to support cancer fundraising. And I'm thinking that is such great push to try, but not drinking to fundraise to
Yeah,
me,
seems.
you know,
Yeah. I think it was in Canada, right? Where there's a study that just came out that said any amount of research is actual contribution to cancer, like
yeah, that's
the amount of alcohol. And
yeah.
so like in the States, we're like, we're not going to do that because that's a lot of money. Like, like the companies would be.
Well, that's it. It was a study done that yeah, they've come out and it was a huge thing. Again, being Canadian, drinking beer is a thing, right? Like so they went on the streets. They went to like Hamilton, Ontario. Like it's like going to old Steeltown, talking to the blue collar workers, literally who they're interviewing outside of the beer store, saying, "Well, what are your thoughts on the government telling you can only have one drink a week?" He's like, "Who are they to tell me?" I'm like, "Oh my God, did you just spin this the wrong way?" It wasn't the government saying number one. It was a study done, but it was like it's like taking away, saying you can only do barbecue once a week in Texas. Like that's like beer and Canadians just go hand in hand. But it was, yeah. So that study came out and hasn't changed anything. But it's, I look at people who do dry January. It's great they want to do it to come off of it. But I find a lot of people that I know who have done it really need dry January through December, right? And some just do it because they just need a break, and it often hooks them, and they keep going because they feel better, and it's the whole thing. But what do you think about? Before I let you go, this whole we talked about the Mommy Wine Club. What do you think about how we can change that conversation other than what we're doing now? Where is it? Because I think a book actually came out about a year ago, all of promoting it.
Promoting wine clubs?
Promoting wine clubs, the Mommy Wine Club.
I mean, look, like there's already studies, and I don't have them, but there have been studies that more marketing is done towards women, right? As far as like alcohol is concerned. It concerns me that it's, I shared this with you. Like I was in we had a really robust roundtable conversation with women. Some women drink, some women are sober, some women don't because they don't like. It was like it was an interesting mix of women, and they were saying that because I don't do mommy wine clubs because I don't drink wine, and so we have coffee or like I don't know, I bring fresh juice or something but the women I hang out with just aren't heavy drinkers, or and so because that's by choice. But one of the friends said that a woman looked at her kids and was like, "I drink because of you," and I'm like, that is horrible. Horrible. Like it might be funny and tongue in cheek, but those are the times like when we're talking about dark humor, it's not funny.
No.
Like you can't look at your child and say like, how do they carry that? Like and so again, like, do I think it's good? I don't think it's good. I think it's contributing to the problem. I think, we've talked about this during COVID, like the increase in drinking went through the roof. More people died of alcohol related incidents in COVID the first year. Heavy drinking in women, this is from a Harvard study, increased 41% in heavy drinkers. It's 4 or more on one occasion in women.
Wow.
Mommy wine culture. It's not trending in the right direction. And then we just talked about the cancer studies. It leads to, they've shown the link to breast cancer. They've shown link to other cancer. Like this is not trending in the right direction. And so I don't know what the answer is, but it's definitely a problem and a concern. And it's not one that's getting better.
No,
it's not.
It's going the other way. It's
going the other way quickly.
Very quick. Well, even things like, remember years ago, the skinny margarita drinks, like although the branding did go towards women a lot more than towards men, and women are the purchasers, right? In a lot of households.
We have a higher fat content than men too. And so it gets trapped in our fat and it's harder to detox from that. Again, those are all scientifically.
Well, years ago, my wife said, why don't you start playing hockey again and join like a men's hockey league? I'm like, because all they do afterwards is crack open the case of beer in the locker room. I go, that's, I don't want to go out on a Thursday night, play hockey from 10 to 11, and then just sit there watching this. I'd rather do something else. Right. I'd rather do, and that's the hard because but again, more men get help. I don't even know why. Right.
I don't know either. 2 to 2.5. Yeah. Men to every one woman. And I said before, it's like women are the purchasers, women run the household. Like during COVID and the pandemic, we were homeschooling our kids. We were still working from home. Like we were still cooking the foods. Like we shoulder a lot. My friend Eve Rodsky wrote this great book about that, like the invisible labor force that women, whether it's even something as little as buying kids clothes or like signing permission slips. Like it might seem like nothing, but those are things that mothers and women shoulder or just take on naturally. Like whether it's culture, whether it's
I don't even get the emails from the school anymore.
Right. Yeah, it just goes, right? But it's like, and so we're responsible for all of that. And like they've said that like we're supposed to work like we don't have kids and raise kids like we don't work. And it's something's got to give. And so what is it? Turning to wine with your friends and complaining? Maybe. Like, is there healthier way? Definitely. What is it? I don't know. But I think that we're at that tipping point where something has to be.
I think we're getting there. I think we're getting, the conversation is getting there a lot more. So that's a big one. Now, you work with the rehab center.
Mm-hmm.
How's that going?
I do.
Is it great?
I love it. It's amazing. Yeah. So my friend Charlie Engel and I are brand ambassadors for Ashley Addiction Treatment. And we, it's amazing. We're planning now this really fun event this summer for July called the Penguin, where you should come if you're in this. I know it's a far trip for you, but it's 31 hours of movement. But the idea is it's for Charlie's 31 year. Right. It's his 31st year of
sobriety. I have to say, if anybody doesn't know who Charlie is, you have to look it up, and you have to watch the movie Running the Sahara
and read his book. His book is like, I listened to it on Audible and I called him and I'm like, dude, you stole a baby. He's like, haha, is that a joke? I don't even know what that means. I'm like, no, in your book, you stole a baby. He's like, oh, it was an accident. And I gave the baby back. And I'm like, your story is so, I don't know how you're alive. Like, I love you and I'm glad you
crazy. Like,
holy moly. Yeah.
Crazy.
So we work with Ashley to help, just kind of amplify their message and show people that like recovery is possible. And it's a holistic approach. Pardon?
When's this event?
It's July 22nd and 23rd.
Okay. I'm gonna mark it.
I'll send you all the info.
Please.
We'd love to have you.
That's where my wife and I try to find things to move to, and it's crazy because
we would love to help you. We're thinking about even like doing a podcast and a bunch of Instagram lives. So Charlie will be there. We have a couple others. Zach Clark is coming from The Bachelorette and runs Release Recovery Foundation, so he'll be there. We're reaching out to some other people to come, and it should be a really, really wonderful and fantastic event for people in the ultra marathon movement, people in the recovery movement. We're doing a 5K for families. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
And with that being said, it's funny because as you learn in addiction recovery, there should be don't transfer one addiction to the other. But I know a lot of runners who weren't running when they were drinking.
Do you know what's funny? Yes, this is true. And I started to fall into that trap this year. I signed up for an ultra marathon in March, a 51 miler. This is after 15 years. And then I signed up for the 120 mile Trans Rocky Challenge, which is a 6-day. No. But listen, I went back and I was like, I got so wrapped up in this. I don't enjoy the process. I enjoy more yoga, maybe running 3 miles, somatic movement. I love swimming. I love yoga, the class. Like I love dancing. I love those things. Training for a 51 mile race is not in my time commitment, my fun. I don't enjoy it. So I had to so the point is, yes. So we have Charlie, who is the Ashley, who is the ultra marathon, guy. And then there's me. That's like the mom.
Right. See,
I love yoga. I do breath work.
As a trainer, people always say, they go, you must love to run. I'm like, you need to run for two things. If you're late or you're being chased. And you need to run 800 meters really fast. Because if you are being chased, the person chasing you statistically stops running at 400 meters. You need to be 400 meters past them. So you only need to run 800 meters really fast. That's literally, as a trainer, that's my thought process behind running.
I'm with you on that running. I like it. We might do a swimming one. This is like a crazy thing, but more my speed, the Catalina Channel, swim the Catalina Channel, like a relay, but with other sober people to raise awareness for addiction, whatever. But so Yeah, so we're doing a really wonderful event this summer.
That's
But
awesome.
absolutely, I'll
Well,
send you the
send me the
details.
details. I'd love to put in the link as well for anybody who wants to find information out about it and really be a part of it and help in any way whatsoever. So
We
awesome.
would love it. And it's a fundraiser, and the money goes towards scholarships to provide treatment for people that may not be able to afford it otherwise,
Which
that
is a
really
lot of
need
people.
it, which is a lot of
A lot
people.
of
And
people.
so it's, or maybe they don't have insurance that covers it. And so we really want to make an impact in the people's lives that need help, that, maybe it's not as attainable for them. So that's it's a fundraiser for that.
Amazing. I love it. Hopefully I'll be able to get there. Again, Hilary, stick around. We want to talk to you for a few minutes when we're done. But thank you so much for taking the time today. It was so great having you and talking with you, and I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
You're listening to Rise Up, stories of recovery, resilience, and renewal with Matthew Tobe.